My wife left me because I'm poor, but she didn't know that I was hiding the fact that I'm a millionaire. She left me on my birthday. No plates thrown. No slammed doors. Just the soft sound of her chair scraping the kitchen tile and the click of the front latch, like any other night. I stood there with wax pooling around the base of 3 small candles on a store-bought cake, holding the knife we'd never use, and listened to an ending that had the manners to be quiet. We'd eaten early, take-out pad thai, because I'd said I wasn't up for a restaurant crowd. She'd worn the blue sweater I always liked and kept glancing at the clock as if the hour meant more to her than me. I pretended not to notice. I joked about being a year older. She smiled at the right moments, but her eyes traveled to the corners of the room, to the cracked paint above the window where the rain always found a way in. When I leaned over the cake, she didn't sing. She pressed her hands together like she was bracing for turbulence. "Make a wish," she said. I closed my eyes and did something childish. I wished for the version of us from the first year, the one that ate breakfast at noon and laughed at broken toasters and shared headphones on buses. I wished for one more day where I wasn't weighing every word, where she wasn't measuring the distance between our life and other people's lives she scrolled past. Then I blew out the candles. She didn't clap. She took a breath instead, held it, released it like a decision. "I can't do this anymore," she said. No tremor in her voice. Just a simple sentence that knew exactly where it was going. I thought I could, but I can't. I put the knife down. "Do what?" "This," she said, and gestured around the kitchen. Not at me, around me. The countertop with the ring where a hot pan once sat too long. The fridge that hummed like it was always apologizing. The cheap blinds that snapped when you pulled too hard. This smallness. There are 100 possible replies to a moment like that. Explain. Beg. Bargain. Laugh. Cry. I did none of them. I pressed my thumb into the soft edge of the cake and left a print that made it look as if someone had tried to climb out. "Is there someone else?" I asked. "No," she said quickly. And then, more slowly, "There's something else. There's a life I want, and this isn't it." I waited for the list. Sometimes a list helps you understand the shape of a loss: rent that doesn't bleed into savings, dinners where the plates are heavy and the wine is named after places, trips with hotels that have lobbies. She didn't give me a list. She gave me a number. "I'm tired of balancing everything on a few thousand here and a few thousand there," she said, and only then did her voice waver. "I'm tired of counting." I stared at the cake. Somewhere in the apartment, the radiator ticked like a metronome for a song we never learned. "I thought we were counting towards something," I said. She looked at me like I'd missed a step on the stairs. Toward what? I could have said the truth. I could have opened the hall closet, pulled down the lockbox, and shown her the accounts attached to a name that wasn't on our mailbox. I could have told her about the quiet exits after college, the 2 companies that had been bought before anyone we knew noticed, the decision to keep it all quiet because money wasn't supposed to be how I outran my father's debts or my own fear. I could have told her that I'd planned to tell her on our next anniversary, that I'd imagined her laugh when I admitted I'd kept us small on purpose, to see whether we were us because of the world or despite it. I could have said all that. Instead, I measured the distance between what was true and what would matter, and I chose silence. Her reason was already decided: she was leaving because I was poor. I was the only one who knew the punchline. "I don't want to fight," she said. "I didn't come to fight." "Then what did you come to do?" She blinked. "To be honest." We stood on opposite sides of a cake like diplomats at a border. Somewhere in the back of my mind a second, older voice spoke up, my grandmother's voice, from a kitchen long gone. "Sometimes people leave because they don't know how to stay without blaming you for the parts of themselves they don't like." I didn't know whether that applied here. Maybe it didn't. Maybe I wanted it to. "I never lied to you," she added, and there was a flicker of defensiveness now, like a match struck in a dark room. "I never promised I'd be okay with this. I kept waiting for something to change. I kept waiting for you to notice what already had," I said, but only in my head. Out loud, I asked, "When did you decide?" She looked down. "It's been coming." Tonight felt fair. Fair. I tasted the word and found it empty. She picked up her bag, the one I bought her 2 birthdays ago, after she showed me a photo on her phone and said, "Someday." She turned back once, saw that I was still there, still me, and then she left. The door clicked. The apartment inhaled and exhaled, adjusting to one less person. I cut a thin slice of the cake and ate it with a spoon. It tasted like sugar and flour and the idea of happiness. When the silence stopped ringing, I washed the knife, dried it carefully, put it away. I set the cake in the fridge as if saving it would save something. I sat at the table and waited for the urge to run after her to pass. It did. Then the urge to call my best friend. That passed too. Then the urge to march down the hall to the closet, pull the lockbox from the shelf, and drive across town to her sister's place where she always went when she needed a chorus. That urge did not pass. It changed shape. I stood. I went to the closet. I unlocked the box. I keep good records. It's the one habit that never felt like a performance. The statements were there, the ownership documents, the sale notices with numbers that look hypothetical if you didn't write the code that birthed them. I spread them on the table like a map of a country I'd never invited anyone to visit. There was the account that held the dividends. There was the trust, its boring title like a camouflage net. There was the LLC that existed to be invisible. I took it all in with the calm you see in people after they've cried out everything there is to cry. She had left because she wanted a different shape of life. She had left because I hadn't shown her the one I could make. She had left because she believed what the apartment said about me louder than what I said about myself. What do you do with that? Do you run after someone with proof they misread the story? Do you surprise them with a car and a key and a new address and the sentence, "I was only testing you," a sentence that feels like a trap even when the test is love? Do you call her back into a life she walked away from and ask her to hold a secret you didn't trust her with in the first place? I made tea instead. It's what I do when my hands need an assignment. The kettle hissed. Steam rose and fogged the window where the paint cracked. The city outside was its usual unromantic self, sirens, a bus brake sighing, the neighbor's television leaking laughter through the wall. I set the mug beside the papers and watched the water feather into the tea bag. Eventually, the surface stilled. I took a sip. It burned my tongue. A part of me wanted to write her a note, "You're wrong about me." Another part wanted to deliver nothing at all and let time do the slow, expert work of teaching. But the largest part, the one that has learned patience the hard way, began to assemble something that didn't look like a plan until it did. Not a performance. Not a parade. Not a headline. Just a path. First, I would call my lawyer in the morning. Not to punish, but to protect. Secrets are only useful if they're organized. Second, I would move the trust into a posture I'd delayed for years, one that made my control explicit instead of polite. Third, I would start telling the truth, but in rooms that wouldn't turn it into spectacle. And last, I would decide what, if anything, she deserved to know, and when. I picked up my phone. There were no messages from her. There were 2 from friends who'd remembered the day, simple and kind. I replied to both. Thanks. Quiet night, but I'm okay. It was true enough. The night got older. I cleaned up, because I couldn't sleep unless the counters were clear. I blew out the 3 candles now lopsided and short. I put the lockbox back in the closet and left the key on the table where I could see it in the morning, a small, metallic reminder that the version of me she'd left wasn't the only version that existed. Before bed, I stood in the doorway of the living room and looked at the place we'd built on purpose, the second-hand sofa that sagged, the thrift store lamp, the plant that stubbornly lived. I let myself be sad about losing it, not for what it said about me, but for how it had held us for a while. Then I turned off the light, and the room became outline and shadow, a sketch of what had been. In the dark, I finally answered the question she had not asked. I hadn't hidden the money to trick her. I'd hidden it to protect the part of me that never wanted to be loved for the size of an account. I wanted to be chosen for the way I show up when buses are late and toasters break and rain finds a way in. I wanted love that didn't need a lobby. But if someone leaves because the chairs are cheap, there's no chair expensive enough to make them stay. In the quiet, another thought arrived, clean, steady, unblinking. If she left because I was poor, what would she do when she learned I wasn't? My heart tightened and then eased. I did not know yet. But I knew one thing, for once, I wouldn't rush to give away the answer. The kettle clicked as it cooled. A siren stitched the distance. I lay down on the bed that held a single person's weight and stared at the ceiling until my eyes stopped trying to make patterns out of the cracks. Tomorrow, I would begin. Tonight, I let the door stay closed. The morning after she left, the the air in the apartment felt strange. Lighter in some ways, heavier in others. I woke up instinctively reaching for her side of the bed, felt the cool sheets, and stopped. There was no trace of her there, no perfume lingering in the pillow, no soft tangle of hair on the blanket. Just an absence that seemed to expand the longer I noticed it. I got up and moved through the place like I was checking a crime scene. The mug she always used for tea was gone. The framed photo from the weekend trip to the coast, gone. Her raincoat, her yoga mat, the small basket of scarves she kept by the door, gone. She hadn't packed everything, but she'd taken enough to make a point. She wasn't coming back unless it was on her terms. I boiled water for coffee and stared at the slow drip into the pot. I knew exactly where she'd gone. Her sister's house was her refuge, the place she always went when she needed to think, which usually meant she needed someone to validate her frustrations. I'd met her sister enough times to know I wasn't a welcome topic. Halfway through my first cup, I sat at the table and opened the lockbox again. It was all there, the neat folders, the bank statements, the share certificates. Millions in assets I'd kept in the shadows for years. The weight of that secret sat on the table like another person. And here was the irony. If I'd shown her any of this before, she'd still be here. She'd be smiling, packing for a trip, maybe even kissing me like she used to. But the kiss would be different. It would taste like the security she craved, not the man she claimed to love. That was why I'd kept it hidden. I wanted her to love me stripped of all the shields money could build. But now she had walked away because she thought I had nothing. I went to work that day, though my mind wasn't in it. My office was a rented space in a building no one would call impressive, 2 rooms, a desk, and a view of an alley. I liked it that way. Here, I wasn't the guy with money. I was just someone who knew how to make good investments and wasn't in a hurry to impress anyone. The market was steady. Dividends were due next week. My phone buzzed twice with alerts from accounts that most people would need several lifetimes to accumulate. All the while, I thought about her face the night before, how final it looked when she walked out, how she didn't even glance back. I wondered if she was waiting for me to call. I didn't call that night. Instead, I started the first stage of what I knew would be a long game. Not a game to win her back, no. This was about letting her write her own ending to the story, while I wrote mine in parallel. I called my lawyer and explained the situation in vague terms. No names, no drama, just the facts. My spouse had left, there was no formal separation yet, and there were significant personal assets that needed to remain entirely under my control. She listened, asked a few clarifying questions, and said, "I can make sure everything is insulated. But you need to decide what you want the outcome to be. Protection? Leverage? Or public knowledge?" "Protection," I said without hesitation. For now. That, for now, was doing a lot of work. We both knew it. 2 days later, she texted me. "Hope you're okay. We should talk." I stared at it for a long time. The "hope you're okay" felt like a courtesy more than a concern. The "we should talk" was the part that mattered. That was an opening, not for reconciliation, but for the truth to start leaking in, drop by drop. I didn't reply right away. Timing mattered. Let her wonder what I was doing, whether I was sitting in the dark eating leftovers or out somewhere she couldn't imagine. That night, I made dinner for one. Steak, roasted vegetables, a glass of wine from a cellar she didn't know I kept stocked in a climate-controlled unit downtown. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, not because it was a celebration, but because it reminded me I could still enjoy things without her approval. The next morning, I finally responded. "I'm fine. Not sure a talk would change much right now." It was polite, distant, and left her with more questions than answers. "Perfect." She replied within minutes. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I just can't live like that anymore." Like that. She didn't even bother to disguise the fact that money, or the lack she thought existed, was the root of her choice. I put my phone down and let the message sit unanswered. By the end of the week, the pieces were moving. The trust had been shifted into a new structure with even tighter protections. The real estate portfolio was secured. Even the art pieces I'd collected over the years, kept in a warehouse she'd never seen, were now in my name alone, free of any potential claim. She had left me thinking she'd freed herself from a future of scraping by. I was preparing to let her live in that belief just long enough for her to understand what she'd walked away from. Not because I needed her regret. Because I wanted her to feel the same shock I'd felt when she stood in our kitchen, pointed at the life we'd built, and said, "This smallness." That night, I poured another glass of wine and sat in the quiet, the city lights spilling in through the blinds. For the first time since she'd left, I felt something other than sadness. It wasn't joy. It was anticipation. A week passed before I heard from her again. By then, I'd stopped expecting her voice to fill the apartment when I walked in. I'd stopped setting the second place at the table. The life we had was folding itself away like sheets you know you'll never use again. The message came late on a Thursday night. "I've been thinking. Can we meet for coffee? Just to talk. No pressure." I stared at the screen for a long moment. Coffee was neutral territory, the Switzerland of reconciliations. But the "no pressure" was telling. It was a preemptive defense, in case I refused. I typed back 2 words. "Next week." I could almost feel her impatience through the silence that followed. She didn't reply. That weekend, I attended a gala. I don't usually go to those, but a friend, someone who actually knew about my real financial situation, had insisted. "You've been hiding too long," he'd said. "Besides, it's for a good cause." The room was a blur of champagne glasses, evening gowns, and the kind of laughter that's always just a little too loud. I shook hands, made small talk, placed a few well-timed bids at the auction. I knew the photographers were there, but I didn't avoid them. The cameras caught me, tailored suit, glass in hand, standing beside one of the charity directors. Not a staged smile, just a calm expression, the kind people wear when they belong in such a room. By Monday, there were photos online. Not headline news, just society page filler. My name printed under the image, no explanation beyond the event title. I didn't send her the link. I didn't need to. 2 days later, she called. Her voice was hesitant, but there was an edge of something else there, curiosity, maybe even suspicion. "I saw a picture of you," she said. "Looked like a fancy event." "It was," I replied, keeping my tone flat. "Work-related." "You didn't mention it," she said, like she was fishing for something deeper. "I don't mention a lot of things," I told her. A pause. "You sound different." "I am different." There was a stretch of silence, and I could almost hear her trying to decide which question to ask next. Finally, she said, "So, coffee?" I could have said yes. I could have let her see the man she'd underestimated and watch the realization bloom on her face. But it was too soon. A reveal is only satisfying when the audience is truly invested. "I'll let you know," I said, and ended the call. That night, I sat at my desk and reviewed my portfolio. Not out of necessity, everything was in order, but out of habit. Numbers don't lie. They don't get bored. They don't walk away because the table is secondhand. I thought about her, sitting at her sister's kitchen table, sipping wine and explaining to anyone who'd listen why she'd made the right choice. I imagined the phrases she was using, "He's a good man," but I couldn't live that way forever, it was just too hard. I wondered if she'd started seeing someone new. I wondered if he had the life she thought she wanted. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she still didn't know. The following Friday, I attended another event, this one smaller, more private. The kind of gathering where everyone already knew each other's net worth. My name showed up again in the event's official gallery, buried deep, but there. I left just enough of a trail for someone determined to find it. And I suspected she was looking. On Sunday morning, my phone lit up with another message from her. "We need to talk. Please." I stared at it, and for the first time since she'd left, I smiled. The first crack had formed. But I wasn't going to rush to push it open. No, the timing had to be perfect, just long enough for her to question, to doubt, to replay that night in the kitchen and wonder if she'd walked away from something she didn't understand. And when that doubt grew strong enough, then she'd learn the truth. The next few days were quiet on the surface, but I could feel her circling. The messages came more often now, short, almost casual, but each one probing for a response. "How are you? Have you been busy? I keep thinking about you." I didn't answer most of them. Not because I didn't have words, but because silence was doing the work for me. Silence invites imagination, and imagination is far more dangerous than the truth. When you answer too quickly, you set the pace of the conversation. When you wait, you let the other person start running in their own head. She was running. By Thursday, she called again. This time, her voice was warmer, the sharpness gone. She spoke like someone trying not to scare away a skittish animal. "I'm in your neighborhood," she said. "Thought maybe I could stop by." "I'm not home," I told her. "Oh, where are you?" "A meeting." The pause on the line stretched just a little too long. "A work meeting?" "Yes." "What kind of work meeting happens at 8:30 at night?" I didn't answer. Let her fill in the blanks. When people don't get details, they start to imagine, and imagination rarely paints a flattering picture for them. In truth, I was at dinner with an investor friend at one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. A place without a sign out front, where the host knows you by name and the menus are leather-bound without a single price printed. The wine list was a book thick enough to use as a weapon. The lighting was soft, the kind that makes people look a little better than they are. We sat at a corner table, eating slow-cooked lamb and discussing the European property market, rare watches, and an art exhibit in Tokyo we both planned to see next spring. Every now and then, someone would stop by to shake hands. It was the kind of scene my wife would have loved, if she'd known it existed. But she'd made her choice without ever asking what was behind the curtain. I didn't post a single photo. I didn't drop a hint online. But in this city, things travel, pictures, sightings, overheard names. If she was curious enough, she'd hear. The next day, she sent another message. "I feel like I don't know what's going on with you anymore." I almost laughed. She never had. Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of knocking. Not the quick, polite kind, steady, like someone committed to being heard. When I opened the door, she was there. New coat, perfectly tailored. Hair styled in a way she only bothered with for important occasions. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Can we talk?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked in slowly, scanning the room as if she was taking inventory. The apartment wasn't the same one she'd left. The thrift store lamp was gone, replaced with a clean-lined chrome floor lamp that threw warm light across the room. The old rug was rolled away, and in its place lay a hand-knotted Persian piece, deep reds and blues, the kind you only notice if you know its worth. On the walls, art. Not the posters we used to hang in cheap frames, but pieces I'd kept in storage for years, a small oil painting by a mid-century European artist whose work had tripled in value, a black-and-white photograph from a limited run. She noticed. Her eyes moved from piece to piece, and I could see her cataloging it all. "This is different," she said finally. "I made a few updates," I replied. "A few?" Her eyebrows lifted. "You've been busy." "I have." We sat across from each other at the table. For a moment, the silence between us was a living thing. Then she reached across, touched my hand lightly. "I've missed you." I didn't move. "What is it you miss?" Her smile wavered. "You. Us. Or what you think you walked away from." She blinked. "Why are you talking like this?" "Because you left on my birthday," I said evenly. "And you did it because you thought I had nothing to give you." "That's not." "It's exactly what happened." She looked down at her hands. Didn't deny it this time. The air shifted. For the first time, I saw it, a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Not guilt, not yet. Just the smallest fracture in the certainty she'd worn like armor. I didn't press. The reveal wasn't ready. This was still planting season, not harvest. When she left, I didn't walk her to the door. I just said, "Take care," and stayed in my seat. The sound of the latch clicking behind her was the same as the night she'd gone. But this time, I knew she'd be back. 2 weeks passed. She didn't disappear, she lingered, like someone waiting for an invitation that never came. The texts kept arriving, always starting soft, "Hope you're doing well," and ending with a question she hoped would pull me in. I answered a few, short and polite. The kind of replies that don't invite more. I knew what was happening. She was trying to read me without asking outright. She'd noticed the changes in the apartment, the shifts in my routine, the way I didn't rush to fill the silence between us. And that doubt I'd seen in her eyes? It was growing. The opportunity came on its own. An old business partner was hosting a charity auction downtown, a black tie event, the kind where entry alone was a small fortune. He sent me 2 tickets out of habit. Normally, I wouldn't have brought her. But that night, it felt like the right stage. I called her. "Are you free Friday night?" There was a pause, then a careful, "Yes." "Meet me at the Carlton at 7. Dress formal." She didn't ask questions. I could hear the curiosity tighten her voice before she said goodbye. When she arrived at the hotel, she looked flawless, black dress, understated jewelry, a touch of perfume I recognized. She expected dinner, maybe a quiet conversation. Instead, I led her into a waiting car that took us to the venue. The doorman greeted me by name. Inside, the air was thick with the sound of string instruments and quiet wealth, men in tailored suits, women in gowns, laughter soft as velvet. Her hand tightened slightly on my arm. "You know people here?" she asked. "I do," I said simply. I let the evening unfold without explanation. Introduced her to people whose names carried weight. Spoke with the auctioneer about the art pieces up for bid. Signed my name on a few sheets without blinking at the numbers. She watched it all. At first, she tried to act unimpressed. Then she grew quiet. Midway through the night, a friend of mine, someone who'd been with me since before the money, came over and clapped me on the back. "Still keeping that portfolio of yours bulletproof?" he laughed. I smiled. "Always." When he left, she turned to me. "Portfolio?" "Investments," I said casually. "They've done well." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't press. "Not yet." It wasn't until the final auction item, a small sculpture I'd admired for years, that I decided to end it. When the bidding opened, I raised my hand without hesitation. The numbers climbed quickly, but I didn't stop. When the auctioneer finally dropped the gavel, I'd committed more than she'd ever seen in a single transaction. Her breath caught. "You just bought that?" "Yes." "With what money?" I met her gaze. "The same money I've always had. The money you thought didn't exist." The silence between us was absolute. "I didn't tell you because I wanted to know if you loved me without it," I said. "And now I know." Her face shifted, shock, then disbelief, then something like regret. "You mean, you've been a millionaire for years," I finished. "And you left because you thought I was poor?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. Her hand tightened around her clutch. "I didn't." "You did," I said quietly. "And that's enough." We didn't stay much longer. The ride back to her place was silent. When we pulled up, she lingered, like she wanted to say something that might rewrite the night. But there was nothing left to say. "You take care," I told her, the same words I'd used before. She stepped out, and I watched her disappear into the building. This time, I knew she wouldn't be back, not because she didn't want to, but because she'd finally seen the truth. And the truth was my gift to her. Delivered late, but perfectly timed. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.